My name is Heather McEnroe, and today I'm presenting the Creating an Introduction from the Better Speaker series. Now, a lot of this may sound familiar, and you might go, wow, Heather, why are we reviewing this? But I'd like to point out that within the Toastmaster organization, there are a few members that have gotten their Distinguished Toastmaster a number of times, and each time they are learning something new. So I'm hoping that everybody takes away just a little something extra that they can apply to their next speech introduction. So I would like to start off with the purpose of an introduction. Does anybody know why we kind of start doing the introductions for our manual speeches? No? Well, I'm going to let you know why. So why is it important? Because we need to prepare the room, essentially. For a smooth transition, it is the introduction. The purpose for an introduction is to ease the transition from starting the meeting to setting up the speaker for their new role. They're about to go from being just an audience member to a speaker. So as the introduction, it is your job to kind of get everybody's mindset going and changing, as well as proper mindset. Next one down. It's to create that feel of anticipation. What are we going to learn about? What are we going to talk about? But it's also to give the speaker some authority. Why are we listening to this speaker on this subject? A perfect example would be when Robin presented her speech on why you should sign your kid up for band. Well, first question, why am I listening to Robin about it? Well, Robin has children, all of which participated in some sort of music program throughout high school, and she was able to speak to her purpose very clearly, and we're able to rely on that information because she's experienced it. She knows what she's discussing. Well, not discussing, but presenting. So, and it is as the introductor, that's when you'd come in and be like, well, Robin has had experience with this, and we were ready to go on to your presentation. So, but there's more to that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here giving a speech. What are some of the essentials? This looks familiar to everybody. We need to know who's speaking, what topic they're speaking on, and the title. And that's where, again, the topic comes in. We need to know, why are we listening to this speaker on this subject? Another fine example of this would be when Sabrina was discussing potty training of her 2-year-old. You would not want to listen to me give a speech about potty training a 2-year-old. I don't have a 2-year-old. I don't have any children. I babysat, but that's about it. So for something on that topic, you would turn to a parental figure, which I believe the vast majority of you, actually all of you in this room, have the upper hand of me on children training. But again, we're going back into the etiquette and essentials of, this is Thomas Vaughn presenting Zombie Survival Guide, Thomas Vaughn. The only time that you would want to hide the name of your speaker, or maybe not fully boast about your speaker throughout the introduction, would be when you're having a guest or a surprise speaker. So maybe one of these days, if we have DeMarco come back, maybe it's a surprise speech, we're getting caught off guard. I'd like to welcome back to the stage, DeMarco Campbell. And you guys can tell him I was talking about him too. But next up, and what is important to include in your introduction, are the speech essentials. Now this is something that I've noticed that we've kind of fallen to the side with, but it's also something that isn't commonly practiced in a lot of clubs. But it's very beneficial to not only the speaker and the person doing the evaluation, but it is very beneficial to the audience, as we are one of the few clubs that allow for our general club members to turn in an evaluation as well as a speech evaluator. So we need to know which speech assignment it is. Whether it's competent communicator or one of the advanced manuals, they both have a little bit of different criteria to evaluate. Your competent communicator, we're looking at more of a structure of the speech, versus some of the advanced manuals, which is more of technique or subject or how you've communicated this. So we're moving and progressing, and this is the best way for the speakers to get the most out of their evaluation. We're also looking at speech objectives. How many people have sat down to listen to a speech and not had a clue on how to evaluate them? That's where the introduction comes in, because we're prepping the audience. Okay, so this is going to be Project 9, Persuade with Power. We're looking for them to move our opinion on the subject of having chocolate before dinner. I am all for that, by the way. And then the last thing, which is the most beneficial, especially with our advanced manuals, is communicating the time of which the speech should be presented in. Now, throughout our competent communicators, we're used to the 5 to 7 minute speeches, but as we go forth and expand into the great world of Toastmasters, you end up with speeches that may be running a little longer, where they're coming up to 10 to 15 minutes, and some that are a little bit shorter, where they're coming in between 2 to 3 minutes. Or, as some projects that I found out today, there are 2 sections, some section put aside for the speech and another section put aside for Q&A afterwards. This is important to prepare your audience for, again, just so that way they know what they're expecting, and not that the audience is going to be timing themselves, but so that way they understand what's going to happen and in the order it will happen. Drafting an introduction. A lot of times we may not think this is necessary, but believe me when I say that it is important. I found this out Spring Conference 2018, where I was actually introducing a speaker, and I came up to him and I said, "How would you like me to introduce you?" And he handed me his introduction. He had already written it to already address how he wanted the room set up, how he wanted the audience prepared, and what he was going to be talking about without giving us too much of what he was actually speaking of. So with the approach, again, we're introducing. An introduction shouldn't take more than a minute. Actually, in most books, it says 30 to 45 seconds. And I know I just gave you a lot of information. So how are you going to tactfully put all of that in 30 to 45 seconds? Well, we're addressing length, delivery, and clarification. We want to make sure our sentences are with a purpose, so that way our audience, again, gets the most out of what we're presenting before our speaker presents their speech. So next, it's going to lead me to applying restraint. There's a lot of don'ts up there, but they're all with a purpose. For the first one, don't upstage the speaker. You're introducing the speaker. You're the transition between, okay, he's an audience member to a speaker. And the introduction should be about the speaker and their speech, less so about you and your feelings of the speaker or the speech. Don't reveal any speech details. This is where it gets important to speak with the speaker before creating your introduction, because while I can tell you that my speech will be about how J.K. Rowling is the greatest author of all time, that's not something that you want to put in the introduction. Maybe go along the course of, this person's an avid book reader. They've read millions and millions of books. Don't surprise the speaker. Does anybody have an idea of why this one is probably it's the most important in my opinion?
Nerves.
Nerves. Exactly. When you surprise the speaker, you kind of catch them off guard. And we all know that getting up here, it's a brave thing to do. It doesn't matter if you're on your first speech in your CC or the last speech to getting your DTM. Everybody has those butterflies. So when you catch them in a tailspin, it disrupts their flow and their mentality. So you want to try to avoid doing that, so that way your speaker that you're introducing can present their material in the best frame of mind as possible. Next, praising the speaker's skills. This one, I know it's very hard to do within our club. We love each other. We always want to hear people do better, and we want to stress how well that they do things. But sometimes this may be setting up the speaker for failure. It may start throwing them into a self-doubt spiral, and again, goes back to surprising them. I know that there have been a few times where I'm like, lower the bar, lower the bar. And I'm sure a few of you have seen me do that right before I get enough for speech. Just, you're here, take it here. Cliches are a great thing and something that we always try to avoid within Toastmasters. However, I feel like if they're appropriate, go ahead and use them, but to constantly say without further introduction, or this speaker does not need any introduction, if they don't need any introduction, then there's no point in you being up there. So, but we're gonna try to work on that as, sorry, distractions. Last thing is saving the speaker's name for last. To repeat what I had said earlier, you don't want to save it to the end unless it's a surprise guest. We want to know who's going to be speaking, because again, you're preparing the audience for the speaker. So if Yolanda's going to be giving a speech, I would like to know that Yolanda's giving a speech instead of the last second when the introduction's been made and she's already on her way up. So that way we can have a better mindset of how to evaluate. Speaker's responsibilities. An introduction is a two-way project. It is not just the evaluator's job to come up with this introduction from scratch. You need to partner with your speaker, so that way your speaker feels like they're being set up properly for their speech, but also you're able to communicate things clearly. And then our last bit is etiquette. We're all familiar with it and handing off the stage, but some things that I've learned from addressing this project is that I did not know that our introductor was meant to lead the applause. I've been doing this for 2 years. I've never been told this. So, in addition to prepping the audience, addressing the speaker, or introducing the speaker, without further ado, may I have Alicia Hernandez for her speech. This is what it's like to be president. This is what it's like to be president. Alicia Hernandez. Thank you, Yolanda. But you're catching on to my drift. You're meant to lead and sort of like a hype man without being too overly hyped, is essentially what it is. Because, well, within our club, our introductors are also our evaluators. So this will benefit you guys the most on that. And introductions are only the beginning, because again, this is just a smaller speech to go in and go forward and to open it up for our speaker. And that is all. Is there any questions?